How could I have guessed that one moment would flip my whole life upside down? It was just a regular day until I stepped into that room. The door was cracked open a bit, and something in me clicked. In a split second, I could have walked away, pretended I didn't see anything, but I didn't. Because right then, when I figured out what I was staring at, I knew nothing would ever feel the same again. And yeah, I was the one to blame here. I started it, and I didn't put a stop to it either. Mark was out at his job, and the house was dead quiet, except for some soft sounds drifting down from upstairs. Ethan was up in his room. At first, I didn't think twice about it. Just another day of a young guy doing his own thing. But maybe he'd want some tea, I thought. A quick chat could be nice. As I climbed the stairs, I tried to pinpoint where the noises were coming from. When I got closer to his room, I saw the door was slightly open. I took a breath, about to call his name, but then my eyes landed on Ethan. He was perched on his bed, laptop balanced on his knees, the screen lighting up his face. His hands were busy, and at first I figured he was just caught up in something thrilling, maybe a car chase flick. But as I shifted my spot for a better look, my stomach dropped. That was the moment I realized what Ethan was up to. My eyes caught the screen's glow, and a chill hit me hard. I wasn't ready for this. I didn't want to see it. Ethan fumbled, trying to pull himself together, quickly turning down the sound on his laptop, but it was too late. It had already happened. When our eyes locked, his face went beet red, the embarrassment clear as day. I'm sorry," he mumbled, looking off to the side. I stood there, stuck, stammering. The door." I didn't even know what I was trying to get out. A weird heat spread through me. I was mortified, sure, but my head was spinning with stuff I couldn't quite wrap my mind around. I bolted out of the room, my heart slamming in my chest. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to calm my breathing. What just happened? I muttered under my breath. Why didn't I pay more attention? But was I the only one who messed up here? Knock it off, Sarah, I told myself sharply. But the mess inside me wasn't just about what I'd seen. Ethan was 25 now, not a kid anymore. And me? I was 50, a woman who'd had her own run-ins with embarrassment over the years. I'd never been in a spot like this before, but I knew that sinking feeling all too well. I stood there in the hallway, heart still racing, running my fingers through my short, wavy hair to pull myself together. Then Ethan showed up at the doorway. He tugged at the sleeve of his hoodie, cleared his throat, and kept his eyes down. Sarah, I'm sorry, I thought I'd shut the door, he said, his voice shaky but honest. I shook my head fast, looking away. No, actually, I should have knocked first, I blurted out, not sure what else to say. The silence hit, but it wasn't just any silence. We'd shared this house for years, but this was the first time we'd ever locked eyes like this, the first time there was this weird vibe between us. I should head downstairs and get dinner going, I said quick, turning for the stairs. My voice wobbled, but I was trying to keep it steady. Ethan didn't say a word, just watched me, like he was piecing something together in his head. Before things started shifting between Ethan and me, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stick with this story. I promise it's going to heat up. That night we didn't talk. No texts, no glances, not even a pass the salt. But that quiet, it screamed that things were different now. At dinner we sat at the same table, but we couldn't meet each other's eyes. The only noise was the clink of forks on plates. We both knew we had to say something to cut the awkwardness, but how? That night passed, then the next day and the one after. Everything looked normal on the outside, but it wasn't. Our silence just made the tension thicker. Then one afternoon, Ethan plopped down next to me. I could see he was nervous, but he clearly wanted to smooth things over. Sarah, about the other day, I'm really embarrassed. I'm sorry. I don't want this to mess us up, he said, his voice edgy but real. I took a deep breath. No matter how weird this was, I had to put him at ease. I smiled a little, shrugged, and said, "Oh, Ethan, trust me, I've had my share of awkward moments over the years. I tossed out a couple of my own stories, and his grin softened a bit, the tension in his face easing up. For a second it felt like the air cleared between us, but deep down I wasn't so sure. I could tell nothing had really settled, even though it seemed like things were smoothing out. That talk we had, it wiped away every line between us, and I could feel it. Things were about to get way more intense. Ethan let out a quiet laugh, dropping his eyes to the table. "Guess we're even now," he said under his breath. I raised an eyebrow and turned to him. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, curiosity sneaking into my tone. For a second his face changed, like he'd just spilled something he couldn't take back. He scratched the back of his neck, pausing, but he'd already opened the door. He had to keep going. He took a deep breath, looked off to the side, and mumbled, "I've caught you the same way before, you just didn't know it." It hit me like a jolt. I froze. "What?" I whispered, his words sinking in heavy. Ethan's face was red, but he pushed on. I never said anything because I was too embarrassed, but I never forgot it. It was my little secret, something I couldn't shake. My heart was racing, and a weird warmth spread through me, that odd feeling telling me everything had shifted. Ethan's words weren't just him coming clean. They smashed every boundary we'd had left. I looked at him, he looked back, and by then we both knew this wasn't just a casual chat. The room felt heavier, like the air itself had changed. From that day on, nothing was the same. There'd always been this gap between us before, an unspoken line keeping us separate. But now, that line was gone. Without even noticing, I started hanging out with Ethan more. Little moments, quick talks that didn't seem like much, but each one just cranked up the tension. Now we'd even kick back and watch movies together. Before, we'd always kept our space, but now there was this pull, something we both felt but didn't call out. Sometimes when Ethan stretched his arm across the couch, or my hand brushed his knee, or our laughs mixed together, I'd feel something weird stir inside me. I tried to brush it off, though. One night I couldn't sleep. I kept flipping around in bed, but this restless buzz wouldn't let up. Only one thing was on my mind. Ethan. This couldn't keep going. If he was feeling something for me, I had to draw a line and shut it down. With that in my head, I got up, my heart pounding like crazy, but my feet were already carrying me to his room. His door was cracked open, a faint glow spilling out. I stepped in and saw him. He was out cold, but right then my eyes weren't on him. They locked onto something else. Something big. My breath hitched, and my body locked up. Seeing him like that set off a storm inside me. I shouldn't have seen it. I should have turned around right then, but I didn't. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to figure out what was hitting me. Then I snapped out of it and stepped back. Something was bubbling up inside me that I couldn't push down, but I had to ignore it. I went back to my room, lay down, but nothing felt right anymore. That night, I had no clue how much messier things were about to get. No matter what I did, I couldn't fight this growing closeness with Ethan. Every day the lines blurred more, and that pull just got stronger. I didn't even clock when it had gone this far, but one thing was clear. Turning back wasn't an option anymore. Then Ethan came home one night totally out of it. The door banged, stuff got knocked over, the noise could have woken Mark, but I knew Mark slept like a rock. I jumped out of my room quick and went to Ethan. I didn't even have time to fix my oversized tea before I was right next to him. His eyes were hazy and a small grin tugged at his lips. "Sarah, are you real?" he slurred, his voice thick but genuine. I took a deep breath and grabbed his arm. "Ethan, come on. You can't stumble upstairs like this. We've got to keep it quiet." But Ethan's eyes were glued to my face. He smiled softly, his gaze sliding over me. "You know, you're really pretty. Have you always been this way, or did I just miss it?" I froze for a beat, but then shook it off. "Ethan, that's enough. Let's hit the kitchen. I'll make you some tea," I said, steering him along. I was trying to clear his head, but with the way he was looking at me and the stuff he was saying, something inside me was unraveling too. Ethan slumped into a chair while I got the tea ready, but then the mug slipped from his grip and splashed across the counter. "Ah, Ethan, watch it," I whispered, grabbing a towel to clean it up. He just grinned faintly. "Were you always this nice?" I rushed to clean up the kitchen. We couldn't stick around there any longer. Mark was asleep upstairs, and with Ethan in this shape, we couldn't risk more noise. "All right, we're heading up, but keep it down," I warned, hooking my arm around his and steering him toward the stairs. When we got to his room, his steps got even shakier. He needed to swap out his clothes, but he was too far gone to manage it himself. At first, I thought about stepping out, but when I saw him fumbling with his jacket, I stepped in to help. As my hands moved to unzip it, Ethan's breathing slowed. The air between us thickened with tension, and the quiet only made it heavier. I knew what I was doing, but at the same time I was totally lost. Ethan's gaze shifted. He was looking at me in a new way, and this was one of those moments we couldn't undo. He paused while switching clothes, letting his hands drop, and locked eyes with me. That's when I noticed my own breathing picking up. The room was so still, it felt hard to even catch a breath. "I'm done playing this game, Sarah," he said, his voice soft but steady. I stared at him, my heart thumping. What was he getting at? "Are you?" he added, his tone dipping a little. "We've both caught each other once, and that's it. You don't think about it at all. I know it's on your mind before you crash at night." A chill shot through me, making me step back, but my feet wouldn't budge. "Ethan, this isn't okay," I said, my voice shaky. He gave a small smile, not a harmless one. "We stopped worrying about what's okay a while back, Sarah. Quit kidding yourself." Then he stepped closer and closer still until I could feel his breath on my face. His fingers brushed my cheek lightly. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Deep down I knew he was right. And then it happened. All that silence, all that tension, it all came together in that moment. The noise in my head went quiet, my doubts fading to a whisper. I didn't push Ethan away, and honestly, I never wanted to. My hands shook, but I didn't step back. When I saw the look in his eyes, I knew there was no more hiding. I swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and slid the sleeves of my sweater off my shoulders. "You're right, Ethan," I whispered, barely audible. "Let's drop the act." I closed the gap between us completely and eased back onto the bed. My heart was racing, but there was no turning back now. Ethan leaned over me slowly, locking eyes for a second before smiling. "Don't be nervous," he said, his voice warm and steady. "Everything's fine." I looked away, a shiver running through me. Even if I couldn't admit it, I knew I'd been waiting for this for a while. Still, I couldn't stop myself from saying, "Ethan, I'm kind of freaked out." My breathing was all over the place because of everything hitting me at once. He smiled, brushing off my words like he didn't mind, maybe because he was still buzzed. Ethan leaned close to my ear and murmured, "Mark can't wake up." I got what he meant. We had to keep it quiet. I felt something huge building inside me, and I had to hold back from letting it out loud. He looked at me and said, "I know, Sarah, it's all good, and so are you." What did he know? I think he figured me out, and he got it. I couldn't help it. I closed my eyes, gripping the blanket tight as my body shook. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stay quiet. Ethan was so out of it he didn't care about anything. That vibe, mixed with everything else, was getting to me too, the thrill of it all, that unstoppable rush. He was drunk, worn out, and breathless. "Ethan, you're flushed. We gotta wrap this up," I said. "Okay," he mumbled, but he kept going, pushing further. I felt another wave hit me, and I stopped caring about anything. I wasn't even myself anymore. I shut my eyes and said, "Whatever you want, Ethan, whatever you want." He must have liked that, because he let loose completely. It was overwhelming. The heat inside me was too much. I quickly got Ethan settled in his bed, tucked him in, and locked his door. I needed a quiet shower to unwind. I had no clue what was coming next. What had just gone down? I thought it over in the shower, feeling jittery and on edge, but by the time I stepped out, my head was clearer. Oddly enough, I felt calm. I couldn't even be mad at myself. My body was as chilled out as my mind. I got dressed quietly, slipped into bed, and crashed like nothing had happened. But the truth? This was just a wild, reckless moment. a burst of crazy desire. Nothing's ever that simple, though, and this wasn't going to stay that way either. It didn't end here. It couldn't. Bigger, heavier stuff went down later, and eventually Mark was going to figure it all out. This story's not done yet. Make sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Turn on notifications and drop a comment. It keeps you in the loop for these stories. Your support means a ton, and if you've stuck around this far, thanks for hanging out.
This is an artistic and fictional creation intended for both entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual people or events is purely coincidental. Some scenes and dialogues in the video are part of a dramatized performance and incorporate elements of grotesque, satire, and exaggeration. The creator stands against discrimination, violence, and hatred. This channel fully complies with YouTube's policies and does not infringe upon copyright laws.